What's up, beautiful souls? It's Candace Cody Jones, licensed marriage and family therapist, associate in Texas, also known as the Spiritual Bestie. And this is Real Talk with the Spiritual Bestie. You are now tuned in to Real Talk with the Spiritual Bestie. Hey, y'all. It's been a while. And the last couple of years, my intention has definitely been to be more present in the podcast. And I feel like I say this every episode, so I feel like a broken record now. But for the past few years, I've really been working a lot on, acclimating myself into the mental health industry. It's been a lot of work, it's been a lot of time, it's been a lot of behind the scenes and balancing that out just with my own personal journey in this process of just reflection. And I've really been, sitting over the last few months specifically thinking about identity and what it means for me in this season and this chapter of my life. And for those of you that have been with me through the podcast, you journeyed with me through so many phases of my life, from being single to being married, to building homes and moving, across states and grad school, and now, licensed now for a year, and into this space now that I'm in. Since we last spoke, I opened my own private practice. So there have been so many things that you all have witnessed through this podcast. And I've really been sitting with how does this impact and affect the work that I've already been doing? How does me being a therapist impact Spiritual Bestie? How does it connect, and how do I connect this mental health and spiritual space? And it sounds easy enough, but for me, I've definitely, really been sitting with whether or not I wanted to release the identity of Spiritual Bestie if I had to. It wasn't a thing that I wanted to do, but it was something that I was thinking about. Do I have to? Do I have to release this portion of, the work in my life and identity and step fully into just being Candace Cody Jones, the therapist? And I really appreciate my mentor because she helped me to realize that they were already connected, that the work that I've already been doing all of these years has been centered around wellness. And this is just in addition to that. This is just, additional sprinkles on the cake. So now that I have my own private practice, it's taken so many months of silence, introspection, reflection, just thought, and just sitting with the different ideas that have been coming to me, the different ways and different visions that I've been having. And a lot of that has also been about my own journey and my own internalized perspective of the world and of myself. And I'll be honest, it's been challenging for me because one thing that I always want to be is authentic and genuine, and live what I speak, live what I say. I don't ever want to just be, a character. It's always been really important for me to be genuine and authentic. And in that, I still have these moments where I really question, how will people receive me? Will people judge me? Will people misunderstand, who I am or what I represent, where my heart is in all of this? So I've had to do a lot of internal work around that, and I'll take a lot of time in reflecting around that, because the biggest thing that I desire has always been community. And it's also been one of the most difficult things for me to connect with since I moved. I felt like when I lived in Atlanta, community was so easy to come by. Atlanta is a really magical place. It's a really eclectic space. It's a really open space. And so moving to Texas, a really conservative, very Christian, region, it's hard to find community. It's not as open and as available. as it is in Atlanta. So that was a big adjustment for me, just moving here and trying to find my people. And even in finding spiritual spaces, because yeah, they're everywhere, it's important to be aware of who's who, because not everybody that shows up in these spaces and says one thing or says that they believe in something actually live and embody that in a real way. And so, I also want my own safe spaces and places where I can exist in the fullness of who I am. And in a space, in a state like Texas, that is really hard. It is really conservative. It's not as open, to different lifestyles or different beliefs. I remember when I first moved here, somebody would always, it seemed like almost weekly, people would invite me to church. And whenever you say, like, I don't go to church, or, no thanks, you would get kind of this look like, what's wrong with you? And so I realized early on that it was going to be difficult for me to find my community here. And despite creating and holding space, I found that there were very little spaces that I felt like I could exist in. I love how beautiful it is when community happens and I get to facilitate that. I get to hold these spaces, and I love that for people. And there's also this part of me that really wants it for myself. And so I feel like, it's a continued process for me when it comes to like community and connection. And what I've realized for a really long time that continues to echo for me is how difficult it is when there's a space for you to exist in as a healer, as a spiritual worker, versus the difficulty in finding spaces for yourself. It's a really hard place to be in. And someone told me a long time ago that because of this calling on my life, that there would be, these periods of loneliness, that it would be pretty lonely for me, but that I would also find, my community. It would just be more difficult, and I have to be very intentional about it. And even in connecting with the Black community in the state of Texas in particular, my experience has been challenging because when it comes to spirituality, it's hard to find connection that intersects spirituality and the Black community in this region. It's hard because people make a lot of assumptions about what you believe in or what it means to be who you are, or to practice whatever it is that you practice. And a lot of people, figure if it's not church, if it's not Jesus, then, they're already programmed through this indoctrination that you're going to hell, or that it's witchcraft and that you're evil. And I realized like a lot of people don't even understand the Bible, because I'm a scholar. So I've studied the Bible. I was raised in the church, but I got deep into the meaning and the etymology of the Bible. And a lot of people do not understand the Bible, but you get a lot of judgment when you enter these spaces and you speak about your spirituality, or people ask you, it's not something I just walk around and broadcast, but, I also, hold my truth. I stand in my truth. So a lot of places and a lot of spaces where there is community of other Black people, it's still hard to find a space that you fit in because of so much closed-mindedness around spirituality, or around, deconstruction. And so many people are just brainwashed in religion. It's something that just has always been, it's something that's so widely spread, and the indoctrination and colonization of the Black mind is so strong that a lot of people are not even open to the dialogue. So, there's a lot of judgment, a lot of hypocrisy that you experience. It's a lot that I've seen and witnessed, a lot of fear. And I'm saying like a lot of it, 99% of it is fear-based. And when it shows up and you look at it, you're looking for belonging and community, but there is this echo of Christianity, it just starts to feel really isolating and it feels really lonely. And I want to talk a little bit just kind of about where I am in the journey of identity and also share some of the things that came up in my spirit to share in this return episode, because community is so important. And I am finding my spaces. It's been a long road, and a lot of that has been on me. You know, I've realized that a lot of this journey for me includes solitude. And a lot of that is solitude. But I had to also get real about the difference between solitude and isolation, because solitude is a choice. And sometimes it's a choice by default, right? When you are protecting your peace, or when you're on your own internal journey, your own mental health or spiritual journey, the journey of the self, I should say, a lot of it includes solitude. And solitude is a choice. And again, sometimes by default, because when you choose these things for yourself and when you choose boundaries, it can lead you to being in spaces where the journey is really just, lonely. You feel really by yourself. And I cherish the relationships that I have. This past year, I've had relationships that really, really blossomed and bloomed for me. And I really cherish those, because so much of this journey and even of my life has really been at the intersection of solitude and isolation. And even in the season that I'm in right now in my life, I have felt really, really like I have allowed myself to be isolated. And I had to be real about that. And isolation happens out of fear. It's fear-based. And I've been sitting with that as well, with, how I have allowed fear to silence me at times, how I've allowed it to keep me isolated. Sometimes when we experience isolation, it's because we're afraid to even make the attempts at connection, to make the attempts at community, to even try to connect, out of the fear of ultimately rejection. And so this past year has been a lot of that introspection and reflection for me. And as I opened my practice, Evolution's Mental Health and Wellness, in September, I started providing in-person and virtual therapy services for Texas residents. So I'm in person in Garland, Texas. If you are in Texas, feel free to connect if you need a therapist. But I've hit another space in my journey that required a lot of solitude, because I had to really connect with the full vision. I had to begin to learn more about business that I hadn't previously learned. Mental health is a different type of business space. And so I just spent a lot of time in solitude, and coming from isolation to solitude, where it's like, okay, I'm ready to step out here. I'm ready to put myself out there. I'm working through some of the internalized fear that I've carried with me over time from seeds that have been planted. And I'm still uprooting into this space of solitude. It feels different. It feels different. And now that I'm coming out of this space of solitude and entering more connection and more integration into community, and just more awareness of who I am in this chapter, I'm really grateful that I've had the time that I've had. And I do a lot of, intensive outpatient groups with clients on a weekly basis. And in these spaces, I get to observe the magic of community connection. It's so beautiful. It's so healing. And when you're receiving connection through community, it really transforms the healing space. And that is one of the reasons I absolutely love this work. So during this time period of solitude, I was given the vision to bring back some of these spaces that I was previously kind of curating, but, I curated the book club, Sacred Journeys, which we will be returning with that soon. I'm going to be relaunching that, but I want it to be a lot more. I'm not going to say I wasn't intentional before, but it's different now. And there's a little bit of a different message. I'd say an extension of that message. So, Sacred Journeys, the book club, is going to be returning soon. I am thinking possibly the fall, maybe sooner. So stay tuned for that. That will be open to anyone in the United States. And Self Care Sundays, I wanted to create that space for Black women, specifically in Texas, because I heard a lot of the same continuous message. And that was Black women saying, I want mental health care, I want community, I want a healing space. And Self Care Sunday was a vision that came to me for Black women to connect in community in the state of Texas so that Black women in Texas can develop and evolve and heal through sisterhood, through relationships, through Black art, Black media, Black music, Black poetry, sound healing, Black spoken word, and a vast array of Black curated healing tools and tools that we can use for healing. And I'm really excited about this upcoming cohort. So if you're interested and you live in the state of Texas, you can definitely find more information on my website, evolutionsmentalhealthandwellness.com. And that information will be in the show notes. But I was given this vision and wanted to create a space because so many Black women are experiencing isolation. So many Black women are experiencing isolation by default because of limited accessibility, because of limited resources at times even. And it's not solitude because, again, isolation is fear-based, and some of it is the fear of stepping into these spaces because of the stigmas and the shame that's associated with mental health diagnosis. You know, a lot of Black women are suffering in silence, navigating mental health diagnosis alone and trying to figure out and navigate what that means. What does it mean to be bipolar? What does it mean to have clinical depression? What does it mean to have schizophrenia? Or how do I navigate grief and life transitions? So I wanted to address these type of conversations in a space for Black women because, again, within our community and communities of color, there is a lot of shame. It gets projected onto individuals that are trying to heal, that want to heal, that are trying to navigate mental health diagnosis. But a lot of Black women don't even talk about these diagnoses with their family or friends because they're afraid of judgment. And this serves as a real barrier to Black women being able to take care of themselves, to be able to really integrate healing as a part of their everyday experience. And a lot of the healing happens when you let your story be heard. And this podcast has been so healing for me over the years. I've, had this space when I didn't have anyone else that understood my deconstruction, that understood my spiritual journey, me navigating that. And I got to really explore my thoughts, my emotions. And I got to do this when I had no one else. So I have, over the years, just had so many different experiences that I laid out in this podcast. And even in doing that, in my deconstruction, I experienced so much judgment from my family because my family is church down, baby. They are super Christians, okay? But I went through that space of deconstruction with my spirituality. And when it comes to mental health diagnosis and mental health care, a lot of people are having the same experiences. I've even had my mom tell me, like, don't talk that therapy stuff to me. And, the shame and the stigma is there. And a lot of times, even when people aren't afraid to speak up about it and to share their truths, they get shut down. And there is a limited amount of spaces that are for us within, these mental health spaces and spiritual spaces that really intersect the two. I don't see a lot of spaces that intersect mental health and spirituality, particularly for Black women in the way that Self-Care Sunday does. And one thing about, you know, connecting in community is the power of connection and the science behind it. And it's really time for us to return back to spaces of honoring human relationships and human connection. And even more so in times like this, we need spaces like this that exist and where we can connect and come together, whether it be virtually or in person. There's a lot of power in connecting with someone in person with a physical touch or physical presence. Even, 20 seconds a day of a hug can extend your life. There have been studies that have shown that the human touch is healing. It heals. And also, within these spaces, there is an opportunity to unfold, to disarm. So if someone is coming in with something particularly heavy, and even if someone else is also feeling weighed and feeling heavy that day, when you come together, there is something called co-regulation that happens. And when you share your stories and you validate each other and you see each other and you hold each other's hand through this process, co-regulation leads to healing. And it's like being, it's like, those experiences, if you ever had, and I'm sure you have, a phone call with a good friend or a relative that just brightens your day, that really just uplifts you. And you get that phone call, you talk to them, it's like a battery gets recharged. You get off the phone with them, you're happier, you feel more fulfilled. And it's an energetic exchange that happens the same way you can get on the phone with somebody and hang up and feel completely drained. So these exchanges that we have, when we allow ourselves to participate in healthy exchanges and healthy co-regulation, it leads to better, longer lasting results when it comes to mental health care. So that's why I wanted to create Self-Care Sundays, particularly for Black women, because we need that. We're the mothers of the universe, and we need spaces where we can have these exchanges safely without having to center other people's issues for fear of, fragility from privileged cultures, but just spaces where Black women can heal in safety. And we're carrying so much trauma, generational pain that still needs to be processed and worked through, because it's evident that it shows up. It shows up in our relationships, in our grief, in our ability to heal. It lowers our life expectancy because stress is a silent killer. As Black women, we're more susceptible to more aggressive forms of breast cancer, of heart disease, and other chronic illnesses because of the pain and the stress that we carry. It raises our cortisol levels. It keeps us in hypervigilance in this fight or flight mode. And they've done research that shows that trauma transfers for up to 3 generations. So imagine and consider the pain that your ancestors have experienced, and then think about the pain that you in your own experience have come across. And now you're carrying your pain, you're carrying their pain, and it carries for 3 generations. So trauma is a very energetic thing. It's a very spiritual thing. And it's spiritual warfare that has to happen. So by engaging in self-care through mental wellness, through, group therapy, healing circles, by doing it in these ways, you can restructure that energy and your gene expression and have an impact on your epigenetic markers. And that's important because that's what then, when you continue having children, that's what gets passed down to them. And not only that, that's what you're carrying within your vessel. So it's vital, it's necessary. And, to just kind of circle back to where I originally started, I've been sitting with and evaluating all of these different things that have been coming up. And through that, the question of who am I now? And what does this all look like? What does Candace Cody Jones, the licensed therapist and the spiritual bestie, like, where do they link? How do they link? How do we keep the integrity of spiritual bestie and bring in this mental health aspect, and even just allowing people to, know my name? I didn't say my name a lot on this podcast. And it wasn't about keeping my identity secret, but it was really more of just allowing spiritual bestie to be, the ministry. And it was something that through channeling and doing readings, like, it was less of me and more of, what was flowing through my spirit. And I was looking, through this journey of reflection over the last several months, just at, like, where's the link and how do I keep the integrity of both things? And how do I bring in, this thing that also has its own set of rules and ethics that I have to follow? Because I'm following the lead of spirit, but ethics might say something a little bit different, or might, cause me to pause and have to really evaluate how I engage or how I share certain information. And all of that's important to me. It's a really important part of who I am in two very different ways. And within that, it's also caused me to, I'm on this continuous journey myself of self-discovery, of reflection, of evolution, and really also unearthing my own traumas, my own ancestors' traumas that I'm carrying. And it's very intentional work. It's, really important for me to remain authentic to it, and for me to be able to recharge, pour into myself, so that I can show up authentically. So I'm not chasing the bag, but I'm allowing everything that's for me, everything that's going to keep this thing going, to flow naturally for me. So there's been a lot of that. And for me, it's really important. It was really important to begin my first group for Black women. I'll have other groups, as time goes on, that are open and more diverse, but I wanted to have a specific space for Black women because some of the trauma that has been experienced has been with, at the hands of other cultures, or at the hands of the system that benefits others. And sometimes I've noticed for clients that has been something difficult, that people are really trying to work through their pain and their trauma, and feel blocked a little bit when there aren't spaces for us, by us. So I wanted to really engage in that and really connect with what that looks like, and how do we heal this, and how do we stop all of these, continuous presentations and manifestations of our trauma showing up in our everyday lives. Fibroids, that's trauma. A lot of these autoimmune disorders that are showing up is trauma. It's trauma based. And they're showing up, and especially the ones, that don't have a lot of research done on them. The more I talk with clients, two of the most common things I hear clients that have heavy trauma share is that they have autoimmune disorder of some sort, and that they have fibroids, or some kind of fertility issue, something in the womb. And I don't think that is coincidental. And they may not have all the science to back that up yet, but I'm noticing this trend. And if you ever have looked at parasites and diseases like that, they have faces. They have faces. It is a very spiritual thing. So, I was talking, recently with one of my groups, and we were talking about this, and I was letting them know that, a lot of these disorders, they will tell you, are genetic, but they don't go deeper into how, epigenetics and gene expression works. And they'll just tell you, your mom had this, so, you're going to have it, but they don't really get down. And some of them may not know, but they don't really get down into the spiritual science as to why these things continue to translate into generation after generation. And trauma will literally change your entire processing system within your brain. And the younger you are when you experience trauma, the more of an impact that it has on your brain and your brain's development. That's scientifically proven. They have been able to, find that. And so when you experience trauma at a young age, your responses, your identity, your behavior is all wired around that trauma. It's all wired around survival, and, avoiding potential traumas in the future that may mimic prior experiences. And our brain is always trying to keep us safe. So it doesn't file, emotional danger versus physical danger. It just processes danger as danger. So anytime we're triggered, that response is coming from our pain. And when you experience trauma as a child, or when children experience trauma, their brains develop significantly different than even when you experience trauma as an adult. So when we look at these, even genetic connections to things like addiction or some other disorder that they haven't done enough research on, or they don't know all the answers to, they're just making up as they go. Within these disorders is trauma. So when we go back 3 generations, if your grandparents carried this traumatic experience and, they weren't able to process their grief, and then they began to give birth, or they already carried their grandparents' trauma and then gave birth or procreated, that was passed on to you. Those gene expressions are passed on to you. And when we look at the Black community, we have post-traumatic slave syndrome. And that was coined by Dr. Joy DeGruy. And she talked about multi-generational trauma that was actually specific to the Black community, and how we've adapted these, integrative behaviors as a way to survive, and how these gene expressions still show up because we had to continue to fight for safety, for security, for survival. And we do it even now. We do it in these microaggressive workplaces. We do it online. We do it in our neighborhoods. It's everywhere because we're never truly able to rest in our daily lives because we're carrying the trauma that was inherited, and we're navigating and carrying our own stuff. So we got to do this healing work. It's time. It's time for us to step forward and really connect with our own healing, because this is spiritual warfare. It just shows up as a physical manifestation. So I said all that to say that in the journey that I've been taking through identity, I'm coming to the realization of who I am now at this point in time, at this stage in my life. And I've had to step back a lot to explore that. So, while I want to guarantee a certain level of consistency with the podcast, especially, this season, I wanted to show up in Black History Month and return then. But the last few years of my life have really required me to step back, a lot of times to be silent as far as a podcast goes. But what's coming, like, I've still been cooking in the background, okay? Trust and believe, I'm still back here cooking. And what's coming is exactly what we need in this time. Always is. Always is. And it's valuable because this is healing work being done in ways that it hasn't before, because I'm transformed in ways that I haven't before. But I've always, when I reflected, I've always been talking about mental health. I haven't said it as, used all the coined terms and things like that necessarily, but I've always talked about spiritual mental health. It correlates. And, there's more intersections than forks in the road in these two things. So I just wanted to also take some time out to acknowledge my community that has still been present with me throughout it all. I am always so appreciative that when I release an episode and I look at the plays, the number of plays for the episode, like, I'm always so appreciative that my community is still there. Y'all are still present, still tapping in when there's a new episode. Y'all have been with me through the ebbs and flows of this journey with the podcast. And it's a personal journey. And it's one that I get to share with you all. You all get to take part in it. And I really appreciate that has been a constant, that when I show up, you all show up too. And I came to realize in my reflections and thinking about how much I wanted community, that my community has been you all. My safe space has been this podcast through the entire journey. It's been here. And I'm so thankful for that, because I could always hit record and lay out what's on my heart and lay out what's on my mind. And I just want to continue the evolution of Spiritual Bestie. And a big part of that is Candace Cody Jones, the therapist. So as we enter, this new year, we have the spring equinox coming on March 20th. And I celebrate both because I love a good celebratory vibe. Okay, so I celebrate both. But as we enter, this is the true new year. And as we enter this new energy on March 20th, and I've talked about it in past episodes of the podcast, but as you enter this new energy, take some time to reflect. Take some time to be still, and take some time for solitude, to really sit with yourself and reflect on who you are, what life looks like right now. These things are important as we enter these new cycles. And this has been my saying for the past year to my clients. Every new cycle of your life is going to require a new version of you. And it's time to upgrade. It doesn't always feel like an upgrade, because sometimes it includes a breakdown. It includes a tower moment, big tower moment energy. But what's built up after that tower moment, when you stick it out, the thing that comes after is always greater than the thing that came before it. So you have to allow yourself to grieve the old, outdated version of yourself. So sometimes, the thing that we're holding on to so tightly, the thing that we're white knuckling, like, we really need to be allowing ourselves to release, because what's coming is better than what's gone. It's time to give up, those old habits, those old ways, those old connections. When you're not aligned with somebody, when somebody is more talking about it than being about it, sometimes they're creating energetic blocks for you. And sometimes things end because their time has lapsed in your life. And you have to also allow yourself to grieve that if you need to, because grief can be a big or small thing. We can grieve the big, and grief is not just about physical death. Sometimes the grief is about, something ending before we were ready, or when we felt like, it was a loss to us in some sort of way. And it happens all the time. We're grieving different things in our life consistently. It's not always big grief, but sometimes we're grieving, these smaller things. And when it comes to grief, we have to learn to be able to hold the duality of our emotions. That ambivalence is what we call it in therapy, when we're holding the joy, but also the pain in the same space. And they can intersect and they can coexist. So a big part of that is learning to realize, like, hey, this grief is present because it's time for me to let this thing go that I really don't want to let go, but I know it's time. And then the joy of knowing that something better is coming along. And this could be a new version of yourself that you need to step into, maybe leaving an old job for a new one. And yeah, it's time to go, but you're grieving the connections that you made in that space that made that day-to-day at that microaggressive job possible. Because yeah, we out here holding on for dear life in these microaggressive spaces. But I also want to remind you to be mindful of what you ask for, because sometimes when you ask for things to be moved out of your pathway, if they're blocking you, you may be surprised on what or who gets moved out of your space. And when it comes to grief, you have to be able to hold the duality of it all. And I have some journal prompts that I want to give to y'all, because as you enter this new year and this new energy, you're really going to have to, you really need to try to enter it in this space of reflection and asking these journal prompt questions, which will also be in the show notes, will help you to really take some inventory and evaluation of where you've been, where you're going, what's needed to get there. So the first prompt is, what does this cycle of my life require of me? And when you ask that, you have to answer these journal prompts with honesty. I always say, when you're doing an exercise like this, do this early in the morning. I would even say bypass all the other stuff and really, like, maybe the night before, write these questions down. And when you wake up, answer them. And let your higher self guide you through these prompts. So again, the first one is, what does this cycle of my life require of me? The second prompt is, what have I gained in the last year and what have I lost? Don't judge it, just answer the prompts. And you can sit with and reflect on your answers after you're done. Number 3, what am I grieving right now? Again, grief can be big or small. So even if you're grieving, getting a new job or getting a promotion at the same job, like, you can experience a little grief there, because maybe now you're moving into a different space of authority than when the coworkers you were cool with. And so some things have to change. Some things have to adjust in how y'all work within the workspace, or how y'all connect within the workspace. So there may be some grief around something like that. But whatever it is, take inventory of the big grief and the small grief. And again, grief is that feeling that comes up anytime something has ended in our lives that either we weren't ready for, or we feel some kind of loss within. So, number 4 is, what did I learn? What did you learn over the last year? What lessons came? Maybe you studied some stuff. Maybe you learned a new tool, a new language. What did you pick up? Number 5, what did I find that I needed? This could be a connection. It could be an app or a website that made your life a little bit easier. It could be a community. It could be a YouTube channel that you're just loving and just feeling so connected to and so, fulfilled and engaging in. Whatever it is. What did you find? It could be a new skincare cream, baby. If that thing got you looking snatched, moisturized, and supple, then yes, that's a win. We got something from that, okay? In what ways, number 6, in what ways can I challenge myself? Don't be afraid to step out of that comfort zone. Comfort zones are slow killers. They keep us sick. They keep us addicted. They keep us bound. They keep us broke. Comfort zones keep us in isolation. And they keep us out of our purpose. I've had to step out of my comfort zone so many times in this work. Some people want to be famous and want to be known, and I'm cool with playing it in the background. But I want the things that I put out to reach the people that they need to reach. And I've had to step out of my comfort zone so much in this process. And, you you got to do it gently. You can't just, you learning how to swim and jump in 6 feet when you don't have no kind of swimming coordination skills whatsoever. You're going to drown. Stick that toe in the water, stick that foot in the water, get that ankle in the water, get that leg in the water, get that body in the water. Do it at your own pace, but continue to challenge yourself and hold yourself accountable. And you got to be able to keep it real with yourself. You have to be able to keep it real with yourself, because a lot of times y'all out here faking the funk and not keeping it real with yourself about who you are, how you're showing up, the habits and addictions that you're carrying. And all of that is holding you back. You begin to be your own roadblock when you do that. So you have to be able to be honest with yourself and don't fake the funk. I was telling my nephew the other day, I'm like, baby, because me and my nephew be having some real conversations. And I was like, baby, listen, you can fake it with anybody else. Don't ever fake it with yourself. Always keep it real with yourself. And I think that the moment that we stop being honest with ourselves and stop keeping it real with ourselves is the moment that we start to lose the worst that we could possibly lose in life, because then we're detached from our own reality. And we got to stay connected. We got to stay connected to the reality of who we are and how we're showing up. And anytime that you're not being authentic and you want to find someone to blame for your behavior and your actions, that's when you set yourself up for failure. That's when you start to really put yourself at a deficit. So always keep it real with yourself. Number 7, what did you accomplish that you're proud of? What are you proud of? It may be the smallest thing. Maybe you did something very small that no one else is going to clap big for it. That's okay. This is not a measurement of what you've done that is acceptable or pleasable to other people. This is about you and what you have done and what you've accomplished and what you're proud of, because that little step is moving you closer to the big things that you're looking at, the big things that you have, that you're holding, in your womb for yourself. So think about what you're proud of and don't judge it. Don't minimize it. Don't invalidate it. A win is a win. Okay. Number 8, what are your hopes for yourself? For this year, what are some things that you hope to do? What are some things that you are pressing forward on? What do you hope to see out of this cycle? And after you do these journal prompts, these 8 journal prompts, I want you to do a check-in on those boundaries. I want you to really evaluate where your boundaries are. Are your boundaries too rigid? Are you, too closed off and not allowing people in, not allowing yourself to connect? Again, is it fear? And the question I ask a lot of my clients and ask myself a lot, is it fear or is it love? Am I operating out of fear or am I operating out of love? So you got to check in with that. If your boundaries are operating and you got to look into them, are they out of fear? Then they're too rigid. If they're out of love, then you're going to see more balance. And we can get really rigid with our boundaries and really block ourselves off from experiencing life. It's like backing yourself into a corner and closing yourself off from the rest of the world. While it might feel safe, right? Because I've been hurt before and I don't know how to trust myself and I don't know how to trust other people, you got to do the work. Because the isolation, it masquerades as a comfort and a safety. Like if I just stay here and I don't step out of this zone or out of this space, then I'm safe. But what happens is it minimizes your experience. It cuts you off from things that will help you to heal. And it keeps you in pain and keeps you in those cycles of pain, because the pain doesn't go away because you stay in the corner. It amplifies. The monsters start to show their faces a little more often and they get real bold with it. So you got to challenge yourself when it comes to those boundaries and make sure that they're not too rigid. But also, if they're too laxed and they're too soft, then, you're just letting any and everything in and out, in and out. You're not holding anything or anyone accountable. And so there has to be a balance within our boundaries. Again, asking the question, is it out of fear or is it out of love, really helps you to determine where your boundaries are, or whatever that thing is, if fear is speaking for you on your behalf, or if it's love that's speaking for you on your behalf. And just because it's your best friend or your mother or your father or your siblings or your partner even, or your children, does not mean you shouldn't have boundaries. And when it comes to the kids, we should be modeling boundaries for our children, because we're supposed to be preparing them for the real world. When you don't have boundaries and then your children, see this, then they learn to not have boundaries. Or when your boundaries are too rigid, then they grow up and have really rigid boundaries because you've likely traumatized them too. So we got to check in with those. And what I see a lot of parents doing as their children become adults is, just really being enmeshed and really not even attempting to respect or support the boundaries of their children. And we'll talk more about parental relationships. I'm going to have an episode where we get a little deeper into that. But boundaries keep us safe. They keep our relationships balanced and reciprocal. So do some evaluating on that. And if you're, finding that your boundaries are all over the place, maybe they're really rigid with some people, really lax with others, or maybe you're not sure. Maybe you're not sure if they're aligned or not. You have to start looking at whether or not these relationships feel balanced for you. If you're doing all the work in a relationship, if you're doing all the taking or all the giving, it's time to talk about readjusting that. And when I say, when I talk about relationships, everyone doesn't have to do things equally. Like, I called you 3 times this month. You've only called me twice. We have to learn that in relationships, people play different roles. But if it's bringing fulfillment and balance to both parties that are involved, or all parties that are involved, then the relationship is beneficial. If it feels out of whack or out of alignment, check to see who is playing what roles, and then you can determine how things may need to be adjusted. I think that's it. That's it. Those are my encouragements. I wanted to give y'all some journal prompts, and I wanted to pop in and just share a few thoughts, a few things that were on my spirit, and just kind of bring in some energy as we begin to enter into this new year. And I'm really looking forward to sharing more with y'all. I want to catch up more with y'all on, the astro in the next episode. We'll get back more into the kind of traditional format of the show with some tarot, maybe some herbs that we can talk about, catching up, and then, definitely doing, the bigger transits that are coming up or that are happening, because I won't be able to do like those weekly transits. I really tried to do those episodes, and it was just more work than I could really handle when it came to just the production of the podcast. But we'll catch up on, definitely we're going to talk in the next episode about this Mercury retrograde, because she's been busy. They've been doing the things, and it's been a wild ride, baby. It's been a really wild ride. And then I'll catch y'all up on just kind of 2025 and some of the changes, aside from opening my practice, that I experienced. I was moving a lot, traveling a lot last year, more than I expected to. At the beginning of the year, but I put travel on my vision board last year, and baby, did I ever. Okay, I was all over the place. So, and I'm preparing for another trip, so trying to kind of navigate all that and gear everything together, and also balancing, life, making sure that I'm taking care of myself, because when I don't pour into me, I can't hold space. I don't have capacity to hold space for others. And I've learned early on in this journey to take care of myself. and to really make sure that if I'm going to do this work, I'm going to do it with integrity. I'm going to do it with authenticity, with honesty, and I'm going to show up the same way that I live my life. So 2025 was interesting. It was really interesting. And I'm really excited about it. I have absolutely so much. Well, I would say I have absolutely no regrets about last year, but I had no energy left at the end of the year. And now, I was doing a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, a lot of vision work was happening. A lot of insight was coming to me and a lot of dreams. I was dreaming like crazy. I was getting a lot of insights and I was asking for, some things to transpire and move. And when I went to Belize at the end of the year, it's like everything started to make sense with the visions and dreams that I've been having. Everything started, it was like going home to the land of like my ancestors was so interesting. It was so interesting. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that trip because that is, I think that was the point, that was a real turning point for me. And after I came back, it was just like boom, 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 boom. It's been nonstop. But I also had asked for, my books to be full, but for me not to burn out, because that was also important. So I'm seeing it manifest. It's coming together and it's been steady. And some of it has been quick. Some of it has been happening like the last couple of weeks. I've just been crazy busy, but it's also kind of started to mellow out to be more steady and less, less of me feeling bombarded with a lot of stuff, because I always want to help everybody. And I had to learn to say no to things. So I wanted to be able to take some time and connect with the podcast to catch up with y'all. But I will be bringing back, our astro happenings, our card energy, our theme. And of course, like we're going to talk about, we're going to have some real talk, just like always. So thank y'all so much. I want to just close today's episode with reminding you that the most important relationship that you'll ever have in this life is the one with yourself. And that is one that you need to have the most honesty and compassion and love for. And stay in that energy. Stay in that energy, the energy of more love and less judgment, and give that to yourself first so that you'll have the capacity to give it to others. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all so much. And I can't wait to speak with y'all again. Y'all have a good one. Take care. Stay woke. Stay free. Peace. It's Real Talk with the Spiritual Bestie.